Hi and welcome to the second episode of Britain Unexplained. If you didn't catch the first episode, I discussed the mysterious sightings of big cats in the UK, so be sure to go back and watch that one once you finish watching this one. I'm Nathan Lockley, and in this episode we will explore a case that has haunted the Midlands since World War II. It is a question etched into both local folklore and pop culture. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? On April 18th, 1943, a group of 4 teenage boys, Robert Hart, Tommy Willits, Fred Payne and Bob Farmer, were searching for bird nests in Hagley Woods near Birmingham. What began as an innocent outing turned dark when the boys made a grisly discovery that would lead to one of the strangest and most enduring mysteries in British history. Hidden inside the hollow trunk of an old wych elm tree was a human skull, and to make it worse, it still had a chunk of rotting flesh attached. Fearing that they would get into trouble as they had been trespassing on private land at the time of the discovery, the boys put the skull back and made a pact to never tell another soul what they had found. However, the pact only lasted a few hours when the youngest of the boys, Tommy Willits, told his father what they had discovered. The police were called, and it wasn't long before they had confirmed the boys' gruesome discovery. When investigators arrived on the scene, they found not only the skull, but an almost complete skeleton of a woman, curled up, knees drawn up to her chest, with a gold wedding ring and pieces of clothing also found inside the hollow trunk of the old wych elm tree. They went on to discover that one of the woman's hands had been severed, the bones of which were found scattered around the base of the tree. Despite the limitations in 1943, forensic scientist Professor James Webster, who was called in to help the police, managed to learn quite a lot from the skeletal remains. The woman was estimated to be around 35 years old and had been dead for about 18 months. She was also believed to have given birth to at least one child. She was quite short, around 5 feet, and had irregular teeth. Even though most of her clothes had rotted away, police were able to find a few scraps that helped them discover that the woman had been wearing a mustard-coloured skirt and a blue and yellow striped cardigan. She also wore a light blue belt and a peach-coloured petticoat, and probably wore blue crepe-soled shoes, as one was found at the scene where she was discovered. But despite all of this evidence, her identity remained a mystery. Local authorities soon found themselves dealing with more questions than answers. A piece of material believed to have been from the woman's petticoat was found lodged deep inside her mouth, which led investigators to believe the cause of death may have been asphyxiation. As it was very unlikely that she tripped and fell into this predicament, the police also ruled that she was very likely to have been murdered. So, you'd think, since World War II, with the telling and retelling of this story, that some of the details would obviously have changed over time. But the details of this story began getting cloudy almost instantly, just as soon as the media found out about it. One newspaper printed that the boys used a stick to take the skull out of the tree, and before putting it back, they wrapped the stick in a piece of material. This was their explanation for how the cloth ended up in the woman's mouth. Another stated that a police officer working the investigation saw a piece of material on the floor, believed it must have been a piece of evidence, and placed it inside the skull so it wouldn't get lost. Unfortunately, this means the question of how this piece of cloth got into the woman's mouth and what part it may or may not have played in her death will always remain a mystery. So the police were now working a murder investigation, the Hagley Wood murder as it would be known locally, and there were a few important points that police worked through while attempting to find clues. Firstly, she was probably killed either at or very close to where she was found, as she was probably placed inside the trunk before rigor mortis set in. Secondly, the boys had to climb to find the skull, which means it was at least shoulder height, so lifting a dead weight above your head and placing it into the position it was found in would not have been easy. This led investigators to believe there could have been more than one killer, or at least an accomplice. Armed with all of this knowledge, the police went back and checked their files of the area, and they found two separate reports from 1941, which is when they now believe this woman was killed, of a woman screaming uncontrollably in Hagley Wood. Police at the time had investigated, but they found nothing, so they assumed it was probably foxes. This lead, along with many others, including possible locations she may have purchased certain items of clothing, were all investigated fully, but none of them turned up any new information. A probable description was printed in newspapers, with the hopes that it would bring the police more leads, but even this wasn't helpful. However, with World War II still raging on, and with Birmingham being one of the most bombed cities in the country, the police had other priorities and the case was left to go cold. Over the next 6 months, the Hagley Woods murder was almost forgotten completely. That was until someone seemingly took it upon themselves to remind locals and the police of this case and the mystery surrounding the death. Discovered at Hayden Hill Road, Old Hill, was graffiti that read, "Who put Lou Bella down the Wych Elm?" This wasn't immediately linked to the case. It wasn't until a second piece of graffiti was found that read, "Who put Bella down the Wych Elm, Hagley Wood?" This got the attention of the police. But who was Bella? And was this a clue being left by the killer, or some sick joke being played on the investigators? This message then started to appear all over Birmingham and the surrounding areas, all in different formats, until it became the question synonymous with this case. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? And since the 1970s, the same graffiti can often be found on the nearby Witchbury obelisk, which can still be seen today. While this graffiti did seem to be mocking a lack of answers, it did however give the police something to go on, a name. But who was Bella? The police looked for anyone named Bella or Lou Bella in the missing persons records, and they asked anyone who knew someone of that name that had been missing for a while to get in touch, but again they got no new leads. So the police turned their attention to the graffiti artist. They hoped these messages were being left by someone who had information and possibly even answers as to what had happened in Hagley Wood. It is also believed that all of the graffiti found was done by the same person. So the police reached out in the hopes of finally getting answers, but yet again they hit a dead end. So was this all done by the killer? By someone with some information on who was to blame for the death of the woman found in the tree? Or was it all just done to mock the police? And if it's the latter, was the girl's name even Bella? Officially, she's still a Jane Doe, but the name Bella will forever be synonymous with this case. Over the decades, with no official explanation, several theories have emerged about Bella's fate. Some believe Bella was a Nazi spy, executed during World War II after being found out by British intelligence. In fact, declassified documents suggest that a Nazi agent may have been involved in covert operations in the area at the time. So could Bella have been part of an undercover mission that went wrong? Other theories suggest that Bella may have been involved in witchcraft. Hagley Wood is said to be known as a location for occult rituals, and some believe that Bella was a victim of a black magic ceremony. They believe that the cloth found in her mouth showed that she was being ritually silenced. But, as always, there is a more grounded explanation. Some investigators believe she was just a local woman killed for reasons unrelated to espionage or witchcraft. Her body was simply hidden in a convenient and isolated spot, and due to a lack of forensic technology and proper record keeping during wartime, her death remained a mystery for much longer than it would have today. Police visited the site numerous times and investigated every avenue of investigation they could, and still never found any real answers. While it is unfortunately impossible to perform DNA tests on Bella's skull, since her remains were lost at some point between 1943 and the invention of DNA technology, the latest addition to the case came in 2018. British anthropologist Caroline Wilkinson created a facial reconstruction of Bella's features using photographs of her skull. The resulting photograph of Bella shows her distinctive front teeth and gives a greater identity to this unknown woman. And unfortunately, in this case, I believe we will always have more questions than answers. Questions such as, who was Bella? Is that really her name? Was she a Nazi spy, a victim of the occult, or simply a local woman whose murder was never solved? And of course, the biggest question of them all. Who put Bella in the Wych Elm? Thank you for joining us for this episode of Britain Unexplained. Make sure you like, subscribe and hit the bell icon to stay up to date with upcoming episodes. And if there's any topics you'd like us to look into, drop it in the comments below. Until next time. Welcome to the second episode of Britain Unexplained. If you didn't catch the first episode, I discussed the mysterious topic of the things. If you didn't catch the first episode, I discussed the I'm Nathan Lockley, and in this episode we will. What began as an innocent outing turned dark as the boys made a grisly discovery that would. So you'd think, since this was their idea of how the lifting a dead weight above your head to place it in. Secondly, I forgot the next bit. Armed with all of this knowledge, the police went back and looked through their files from 1941, which is when they now believe this woman was killed, and they found two separate accounts of me forgetting my lines. Her body was simply hidden in a... Police did something